Today's gospel is one of those readings that I wish we didn't have to wait for over a year when we get back into year A in the lectionary to hear on a Sunday, because it's one that I think we all really need to hear, and possibly not just on a Sunday, but at all times. This reading tells us who we're meant to be, not just as a parish, but as individuals, as individual Christians as well. And it's not just a lesson that's something that we can learn here in our parish at St. Luke's. It's something that all churches everywhere can learn from. If we want to make sure people are coming to and staying in our parish, then we shouldn't act like the leaders of the scribes and the Pharisees. We shouldn't be judgmental towards others. We shouldn't make people jump through hoops. And that sounds easy on the surface. It's really not. It's really, really difficult. It is so easy for us as churches, and I've seen this so many times, for us to forget that as a community, we're not called to be insular. We're not called to just sit tightly to ourselves, but instead we're called to be open to growth, and thus welcoming to others, even if they don't seem to quite fit with our community or what we've got going on here in our context at this time. But if we can do that, if we can be welcoming, open, even when it doesn't seem like somebody is going to be the right fit or connect well with our community, if we can still let them in, we won't have to struggle with that question of why it is so hard to retain people in our church. And that's whether that's our community here or anywhere within the broader Episcopal Church. The way we can do that, the way we can be open to letting others in, is by living into what Jesus says at the very end of our gospel lesson today. Because we're not called there by what Jesus says to be know-it-alls. We're called to be students. We're called to strive to learn. We're called to grow, to continue to grow in our trust and relationship with God. This is a lifelong journey that we're on. It's an adventure with many ups and downs. This is something we never finish working on until that day where we see Jesus face to face in the next life. Being a lifelong learner means following Jesus's final words in the gospel reading today. The greatest among you will be your servants. All who exalt themselves will be humbled, and all who humble themselves will be exalted. Put another way, as Paul does in 2 Corinthians 12:9. Instead of just saying that all who exalt themselves will be humbled, and all who humble themselves will be exalted, Paul says that the power of God is made perfect in weakness. My hope is that you will share what you've learned here today. And that's not to be know-it-all, but because you've learned something here from what Jesus has to say in the scripture, from what Paul has to say in the scripture that connects with what Jesus has said. It's so easy for us to be prideful. So easy for us to think that we have all the answers. We unfortunately see examples of these kinds of people who feel that they have the answers, who want to tell others that they have all the answers. We see examples of these kinds of people around us in the world. And unfortunately, too, we sometimes see them in the church as well. Just as Jesus showed examples of these sorts of people in his own day. My hope is that you will be different. My hope is that instead, you will go on to be lifelong learners. You will strive continually to grow and learn in your faith, to grow, to trust, and be closer in relationship to God. I also hope you will do the work to make this church, and any church where you may be, a place where all can come and do that work of learning, do that work of coming closer to God without being judged for who they are, but instead to be nurtured so that they can do the work that God has given them to do, just as we do the work that God has given us to do. And that work is simply this: to be servants of God, not to be exalted ones, but instead to be humble so that we might be exalted. Exalted as those servants of God who spread the love of Jesus to everyone in the world.